thank you everyone for joining. Today I have Guy Royse with me. I want to talk a little bit about his experience. So Guy, why you don't introduce yourself?
Well, hello everyone out there in podcast world land, whatever we call it. When I was younger, we used to say hello out there in TV land, but no one. So, welcome to the podcast. My name is Guy Royse, and I'm a developer advocate at Redis.
Let's start talking about when you started to code, right? How was that in the I think you say 80s, right? So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I actually kind of draw two distinctions on the code that I wrote. There's like the first time I ever wrote code, which was very much in the 80s. And then there's the first time I got paid to write code, which is honestly the more important distinction. I think, it's like, I wrote code in the 80s in elementary school back when command line number basic was a thing, sort of a 20 print guy, 20 go to 10, or 10 print guy, 20 go to 10. And create these little infinite loops. You'd have the line numbered commands and everything. And I did that. My very first code was written on a Commodore VIC-20, I think, or it might have been a 64.
Nice.
At a Kmart that they had set up so that, on a TV so you could try it out before you buy it. And so that was my first programming experience. And I was probably in the 5th grade. Yeah, I was probably in the 5th grade.
Wow.
So that would have been the early 80s. I had learned how to do this because as a kid, I was always into like nerdy, technical and sciencey things. I've had this lifelong desire to try and understand how things work. And so I would take things apart, much to my parents' chagrin. You may have had similar experiences in your childhood. Yep. I know I'm not unique in this, right?
Yes.
But I had found this book called It's Basic.
Okay.
And, it's been out of print for 4 or 5 decades probably at this point. But I did find a cover of it online, and it talked about how to program computers using line number basic. And in my elementary school brain, computers was like this big, advanced, complex thing. And how am I ever going to learn this? And someday I'll know. And I got this book and I read it. And I'm like, oh, well, that's easy. Because you would just give it a series of instructions. They had to be very, it was coding, right?
Yep.
It's a series of instructions that were just laid out in a very precise fashion. I'm like, I get this. This makes sense. I understand this is what programming is. And about that time, I decided when I grow up, I'm going to be a computer programmer.
Nice.
Now, most people when they're in the 5th grade, don't make decisions like that. And it took me many years to realize that I was weird for that. But I had made that decision. A year later, I watched Tron for the first time.
Nice.
And oddly, it gave me a good sense of what the career would be like because I saw Bruce Boxleitner sitting in a cubicle wearing glasses. And I'm like, well, I'm going to grow up. I'm going to sit in a cubicle. I'm going to wear glasses. I'm going to program computers.
Nice.
I ended up never having to wear glasses until I got into my 50s. I have them now. I did totally sit in a cubicle, however, and write code.
Yep.
And so, but that gave me a vision. And throughout school, I made decisions to get me there.
Yeah.
And so I learned how to code on more programming languages. As I got older, I learned Pascal. I had something in my head. I took typing. I deliberately took typing in high school so that I could, because I knew I'd have to know how to type to be a programmer. And so all these decisions, I even went to a vocational school.
Nice.
So the last 2 years of school, through elementary, junior high, high school, you can choose to take your last 2 years and learn a trade. And I didn't go and learn welding or, although that's not a terrible career these days, or auto mechanics or something like that. What I learned was electronics because partly because it was a programming adjacent. It's how these machines work. And I wanted to get lower beneath them, below the code and understand what's happening down on the metal.
Yeah.
And so I took a year of analog electronics and a year of digital electronics, and I ended up programming in assembly code.
Nice. I hated it.
Well, this was the 6502 microprocessor. Well, the instruction set for the 6502 that the Commodore 64 had. We had a little board for learning this stuff. So I wrote, and it had a little it had a selection of 7-segment displays on it. And I wrote a little program on paper in 6502 assembly, translated it by hand, assembled it by hand into bytes. And then there was a little loader program on that board, and I dutifully plugged my code into that thing. And when I was done, it spelled bad words on the little 7-segment displays because I was 16.
Nice. No, that was great.
And so this was the experience all through that. And then in college, I went and learned computer programming more properly there. And learned a lot of the languages I use today and a lot that I don't, and a little bit of everything in between.
Awesome. So I have a kind of a similar experience. I started with Visual. Well, actually, I started with C++ in Solarix. All
Trial by fire, that.
Oh, yes, all terminal. There was no user interface, right? I would say kind of something similar. I took assembly language. I absolutely hated it, because for me, when I was building the code, it was like this. In my mind, it was like the same thing that I'm using to do a math operation is the same thing to draw a line, like something similar. And I was like, I cannot I cannot understand this. I don't like it. So that was assembly language for me. Visual Basics after BB6 pretty much, and then of course I started in the .NET world, I would say. But something similar to me happened. In fourth grade, I decided that I wanted to get to go into a career that has to do something with computers. At that point, I didn't know exactly what it was gonna be, but it was something similar, like it happened to you. So that's great to hear. That we have kind of like a similar story.
That's really cool. That's super cool. Well, and for me, it was I was like the first person in my extended family in a long time to have gone to college, and I got a scholarship to go and everything.
Nice.
My background is what you could charitably call one generation out of the trailer park and two out of Kentucky.
That's you.
Although Kentucky, don't take that wrong, people in Kentucky who are listening. It's a fantastic place, and I love it.
I know.
Not the highest rung on the socioeconomic ladder, and it was a big deal. Honestly, you still carry that stuff with you too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like you could take the boy out of the trailer park, but you can't take the trailer park out of the boy.
I mean, everything. I say every experience that we had is what build us and what we are right now. So we learn from that. We learn from each one of them. So absolutely, it's important. If you were to compare, right, the 80s with the 90s, right, in coding side, or what were your biggest challenges, coming from the 80s, thinking into 90s, maybe early 2000s?
Well, the 90s were kind of, so I graduated from college in 1994.
Okay.
And so the 90s for me were basically growing up. Right? I turned 18 in 1990. I went to college and studied stuff for it was less than 4 years. I was out in like 3.5-ish years. I went to DevRel, which that was a thing that they did where you would just go year round and not take summers, and then you could be done in 3 years. And I did it in 3 years and 4 months because I was a little bit of a slacker. Mm-hmm. So. And so for me, the variation from the 80s and 90s, the 80s was when this was a toy, the thing I played with. And then the beginning of the 90s was just learning more, getting deeper into it. And but then I really, you don't really get deep in something, even in school, until you're out of school and you actually have to do it for money all day long.
Yeah.
Because even when I was in college, I wasn't sitting down and writing code for 8 hours a day. I was, studying a bunch of other topics as well, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the 90s compared to the 80s they were completely different worlds. My 80s experience was all home computers and things that you play with. It was the Commodores and these sorts of things. And then the 90s were all about me learning about PCs. And so I had an old 8086. It was an upgrade from the 8088. And I actually learned a bunch of COBOL in college.
Nice.
And I learned C. C++ was still pretty new at the time.
Yep.
But I actually bought the books on my own and learned it on my own time. And then it was just doing it professionally. And the 90s were kind of a tumultuous period for programming in general because we were going through the dot-com boom and just everyone could get jobs and salaries are growing really fast. And it was quite the ride. And then the 2000s came and the ride kind of crashed a little
Y2K, bit. Y2K, and all the...
I did a lot of Y2K projects. Actually, I was working in consulting the last 5 years of the 90s, and towards the end there's a lot of money to solve the Y2K problem because, impossible. This deadline is not going to care about anything. It must happen come hell or high water, right? And it happened. I actually think that was part of the reason. I think this is underappreciated, but everyone thinks the dot-com bust was the dot-com bubble finally burst and everything fell apart. But a lot of it was just the money that was spent on Y2K as well. All of that dried up overnight.
Yeah.
As soon as within a few weeks of, okay, looks like everything works.
Yeah.
Everyone stopped spending all that money. And then they're like, okay, now we can go back to doing the thing we were doing and all the stuff we put on hold. And that combined with the bursting of that bubble, I think, resulted in a lot. It damped down the economy a lot at that point.
Got it. Got it.
And in the 2000s, though, there was a lot of change in that period. I've got a friend, he's an attorney who I worked with as a programmer initially when he got out of college, and then he later on went back to school and became an attorney. And when he got out of law school, he ended up getting a gig with a startup here in Columbus where they needed someone. It was small, and they needed someone who could do a lot of different things. And he's like, well, I can do a compliance because I'm an attorney, and I can also do test automation. I wrote code, and so he was the kind of guy that really fits well in a small startup because he could wear a lot of hats. And he had this big gap from the 90s to the like around 2010 where he was writing code, looking at code again. And he commented on how a lot of the code was not about the plumbing anymore.
Yeah.
Like in the 90s, it was a lot of, okay, I'm defining memory in C, and now I got to keep track of it and delete the memory. And you're managing what the machine does mechanically. And it transitioned to, I write my code, which is managing what the machine does semantically. It's the things that I want it to do as opposed to the things I need to make it do so that it will do things.
Got it.
If that makes any kind of sense.
Yes, absolutely. For me, at least, it makes sense.
Yeah. And any developers out there, I'm sure they... Well,
really,
if you're a younger developer, you may not fully appreciate that difference, but if you've done any assembly, you will.
Yeah.
Because I remember on the 6502 assembly language, it didn't even have a multiplication operation.
Yeah.
So you had to write multiplication by doing looped addition.
Yeah. That's what I was saying on assembly. It was like in my mind, it was like, okay, so it was all I would say extraterrestrial, even though I was coding. But for me, talking it was even talking about, I think it was hex, right? So you have to addition was like jump and things like that. I was like, oh my god, that's I cannot get into it. It was something that I could not love. Like I could not,
I could certainly appreciate that. It's not something I would want to do for day in and day out. I think I would. You would stop thinking in words after a while.
Yes.
I think it would just drive you. The men and women who do that, I salute you.
Yes.
It's fun to play with and understand how it works, but I would not want to write code in it every day.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't even want to write code in C and C++ every day because I don't want to have to worry about managing memory.
Exactly.
Honestly, Rust kind of does this for me too. I want to love Rust so badly, but it brings back that sort of, I'm busy making sure that it does the things mechanically so that I can't introduce like buffer overruns and dangling pointers and that kind of stuff. Rust is another language that's kind of like that, which honestly I think is why more people use Go when they need a systems level programming language. Although Zig's on the rise too.
Nice. Well, let's move to your path to DevRel, right? So I will say, what was the point where you transition, right? When you transition from building products to developer relations, what was that time? And probably we can talk about how DevRel started, because I remember in the, I'll say 2004, maybe 2003. That's where a whole I would say I start seeing a lot of evangelist. I think that was the word where Microsoft, came out with. So talk to me about that, like how you became into DevRel, like how you became there.
Yeah, I remember when it was new, when all these people at Microsoft started calling themselves developer evangelists, and it was about 20 years ago, maybe a little more, and I never really thought about myself going down that path at all. It wasn't even on my radar. I didn't know what I was going to do. To call my career planned in some ways, I started out with the story of it's like as a kid I planned to do all these things. But once I got there, I'm kind of like, plan. There's a lot of happy accidents.
Yes.
Well, it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what to plan for.
Yeah.
And then the world changes out from underneath you at the same time, and so you can plan a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And but my plan out of college was just to work and make money writing code, and this is fun. I get paid for doing a thing that I like to do. And then I discovered the conference scene, and I started seeing these people that called themselves evangelists, and they gave interesting talks on interesting topics. I kind of found myself there more than I planned on being there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pursue developer relations. I was recruited into it.
Okay.
So I had there's two key events that I remember that sort of pushed me into this direction. One was I remember going to the very first Code Mash, which is a conference in Sandusky, Ohio. Uh-huh. Actually, at the day of the recording, they're sending out their acceptance and rejection letters. So if you got accepted and you're listening, congratulations. If you got rejected and you're listening, try again next year.
Yes.
Keep trying. It's a hard event to get into. So I went to the very first Code Mash, and there's this guy I worked with, Dave Donaldson, and he was giving a talk, but he was also someone I had worked with.
Okay.
Like all the time during the day, and I mean, not every day, but we were on the same floor in the same office building for the same company. And he was giving a talk, and I'm like, in my brain, it was like, well, the people that give talks at conferences are like these special people who are experts that write books and, do all these things. And I'm just like, I'm just the laity, and they're like the clergy, right? It's like, so this isn't something that I do, mm-hmm. right? That's how I kind of thought about it. And then I saw someone that was just a regular Joe like me, and he gets up there and gives a talk, and I'm like, oh, I could do this.
Yeah, you related to that, yes.
Yeah, and that drew me in a little bit. And then I remember I started. We started internally when I worked at Nationwide Insurance. We started an internal conference, okay. And my boss at the time pushed me into speaking.
Okay.
And I'm like, everyone is terrified of public speaking, right? And I was terrified of public speaking, which is kind of funny in retrospect. Yeah. But I was. And I got up on stage, and I was nervous. I was really nervous. And I started talking, and then the nervousness evaporated, and I was just making jokes and engaging with the audience and being friendly and funny. And it was just sort of like, okay, this is the thing that I'm sort of meant to do. Like, gotcha. I hate to brag, but I'm going to say I was kind of a natural.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to say that I'm a natural, but I guess more to say it was very natural for me to do it. And after that, I'm like, you know what? There's meetups. Let's go ahead and start speaking at things. So okay. I started pushing into speaking at meetups. I ended up running the Columbus JavaScript user group nice. As part of that. I ran that for, about 15 years. I ended up speaking at Code Mash eventually. I gave a talk on prototypal inheritance in JavaScript. I remember that was very exciting. And I just started speaking wherever I could, and I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And then at one point, I left Nationwide. I worked for a consulting company here in Columbus, and they were more amenable to me speaking at things because it helps their brand if their consultants are out there publicly visible. And at one point, a startup here in Columbus decided to reach out to me about hiring me as a developer advocate. And I'm like, I think that's a good idea. And so I went ahead and did it. They called me a developer evangelist.
Okay.
And then that startup got bought by DataRobot. And so I was then a developer advocate at DataRobot.
Nice.
And then I quit DataRobot and joined Redis.
Nice.
And that's the rest is history. But this is one of those things where I was recruited to this thing because it's like, well, he's local and there's a lot of public speaking, and their head of engineering went into the engineering room, which consisted of like 8 people. Mm-hmm. It wasn't him. It was the CEO. Did anyone here know Guy Royse? And 6 of the 8 people raised their hand because I had been speaking at things locally, and they had, I was well enough known that. And so they came in and said, hey, you want to work in DevRel? And so I was kind of recruited to it. It hadn't even occurred to me that I should consider it. I'm just I'll go into consulting, and then, I can give these talks and stuff like that, and it'll be fine. And it just launched this career. And so I ended up working for them, and then was at DataRobot for a while, and then I joined Redis.
Awesome.
And so I didn't plan it.
Yeah, it
I made choices. because I liked the public speaking. So I made choices to move me in that direction. But I was brought into it, and I'm like, well, I was prepared for the opportunity when it arrived without even realizing that I was prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that leads to my next question. Is like, right now, if there's someone that loves coding, right, for this new generation, what do you think they can do to explore DevRel as a career? Like, what those things that they can do now? Like, it will be different from how you started. So that's what I'm asking.
I think there's two things you need. I think there's two aspects that make this work. And one of them is super solid advice, and one of them is probably going to sound like sketchy advice. So the super solid piece of advice is just go out and start speaking. I started at meetups. I started at work, and then it turned into meetups, and then it turned into local conferences, and now I speak all over North America and Europe. And I get accepted very regularly. And so, but that's been a 15-year overnight success, right? It takes a long time. And so if you want to get into this field and you want to do the speaking aspect of it in particular, because developer relations isn't just public speaking. There is more to it than that. There's a lot of content creation and online communities and that kind of stuff. But that particular speaking aspect, just start doing it. Do it in your local meetups. People who run meetups are always starved to get people to give talks. It is very easy to get into a meetup. You can just go to a meetup organizer and say, hey, I want to talk. When can I? This is what I'm thinking. Do you like it? Whatever. Just start talking to them and it'll happen. And if you run into that odd meetup that's so successful that they was like, oh, we got a 9-month backlog, go to the next meetup.
Yeah. And even before that, like in the meetups, you can start at your own, job. For example, you volunteer yourself, put yourself on that position on speaking.
Yeah.
And I will say from my side, I started, I think, what you mentioned, public speaking, everyone is afraid of it. It kind of relate because I was very shy when I was growing up, but I was in a band. So I play in so many places in front of so many people that it gets to a point that it's like, no, you're not afraid anymore.
Yeah, I just get on stage and do my thing,
Exactly. So that's great. That's great. So I was saying, pretty much you're saying is start getting involved into public speaking, right? So that's one of that you want to say to the new generation. And the second advice you were gonna.
And I might generalize that public speaking stuff a little bit more to say get involved in community. Because that's a lot of the job too, is being engaged in various developer communities. And so that's the more general skill. Speaking is one way to do that. Organizing events is another way to do that. So organizing meetups or helping on conferences, even just volunteering for events is another way that you can get involved in that community. And you can do that online or in person. The sort of sketchy piece of advice that I'm going to offer is it's in some ways bad career advice, but it's what I did, and it kind of worked out for me, which is be a generalist. Like everyone always says you need to specialize, and they're right.
Yeah.
I tend to be a bit of a generalist, which is basically just a way of justifying the fact that I'm ADHD. But there is a degree to which knowing a little bit about a lot can really let you go to a lot of places. So I can successfully speak at Java events and JavaScript events. And I've spoken at Python conferences, and I've spoken at .NET events. And then part of it is because in my career I have done .NET. I do a lot of JavaScript nowadays. I have done COBOL even. And so having that wider depth, is that even a word? But having that greater breadth of experience can be very useful when you're in developer relations, because you need to talk to developers in a lot of different communities. Specialization helps, but like on our team here at Redis, we have people that are pretty good at JavaScript. We have some people that are really good at Java. We got some people that are good at Python. But we're a little weak in the .NET space. I'm probably the most .NET-y of anyone because I was there when .NET started, but I haven't done day-to-day .NET stuff. But being able to dive into those other things helps a lot. So I guess the real advice is be T-shaped. If you've heard that expression before, where you want to have depth in one area, but have breadth in a lot of areas as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really more the advice. So that makes it less sketchy if I say T-shaped than I say be a generalist.
No, I totally understand. I get you. And I will say, that is great advice. Thank you for that, because that's something that the new generation, I'm sure that they will like. There are different career paths, right? And I'm sure there are people out there that want to get into DevRel. They don't know how to get started, where to get started, how to get there, right? So I always like to, payback, right? Payback to whatever in my life, people have done for me, right? Now I'm in a position I can actually, bring the advice.
Yeah.
Sometimes I didn't have when I was growing up, right?
Yeah.
So now I can, do that, and that's awesome. I would say, for the last question, I would say, if you could go back, right, and give your younger self one piece of advice, what will it be?
I don't know that I would do that, honestly. Two reasons. One, it's always two reasons, right?
Yeah.
One reason is I don't think my younger self would listen to me.
Okay.
I've actually kind of run this through my head, and I remember people giving me advice when I was that were older than me when I was young, and I'm like, okay, yeah, now I know what I'm doing. Like every 20-something, I'm an expert. Every teenager, I'm an expert. I know what I'm doing. What do these old people know?
Yeah.
Although I did listen to one piece of advice, which this guy gave me, which was, he said, stay technical. I would run into all these people that had moved on into up the hierarchy, and then they all missed the days when they wrote code, because that was the thing they actually liked.
Yeah.
And so I made a decision to stay there. So maybe I would have taken advice. But the other thing is there's this really great piece of advice that I got off of another podcast, and I was interviewing this guy named Jack Barsky, who was a former Stasi spy that had migrated to the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Migrated. He was spying, but he stayed, right? And he, at the end of the interviewer asked him, do you have any regrets? And he said, yeah, but if I'd made different choices, I would just have different regrets.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that kind of is how I answer that question. It's like, what would I do differently? I don't know that I would, maybe I would have done something differently, but I don't think that would have fundamentally changed anything. I would just have a different set of things that I regretted.
Got it.
And so I actually thought it was some of the best advice I'd heard in my life.
Awesome. So if there's anything that you would like to say to this newer generation, any advice or any key points that you want to leave, to this newer generation?
Don't worry about what you're learning. Just keep learning. I have found things in my career that I actually, and this is a whole other story and I won't launch into it, but in my career, I was able to solve a technical problem because in high school I thought astrology was interesting and I was reading about it. And so you never know what's going to be useful. The important thing isn't what you're learning, it's the fact that you are learning. Because like I said, you don't know what's going to be useful. If you're not learning, that's a problem.
Yes.
Just keep learning. Learn what interests you. Learn what you think might be useful. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're wrong. It's hard to know. Although it's not black or white either. So, there are some things you can look at and say, clearly this is going to be useful. And some things you look at and say, clearly this is going to be useful. But then you can still be wrong.
Awesome.
And so as long as you are moving forward, you're doing the right thing.
Awesome. No, that's great. Thank you, Guy. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. I think today was great, getting into DevRel, the experience of Guy Royse, and now how you can become to DevRel if you're interested. So if you like this episode, please subscribe, share the content, and see you next time.
See ya.